They say the silence of the desert is what gets to you, that the vast, unending emptiness can break a man's mind. That's not true. The worst part is the noise you can't quite hear, a deep, resonant humming you feel in your bones that isn't an earthquake, but something far more deliberate. My name is Cole Matthews. I was a sergeant in the Air Force, and for 37 nightmarish days, I was a security guard at Area 51. My job, I soon discovered, wasn't to keep curious civilians from getting in. It was to keep something unimaginable from getting out. And that something was starting to leak through the cracks, poisoning everything and everyone it touched. When you hear the words, Area 51, your mind conjures images of captured flying saucers and alien autopsies, tales spun in late documentaries and conspiracy forums. The truth, I learned, is somehow less exciting and 1,000 times more terrifying. There are no little green men buried in the Nevada sand, no extraterrestrial technology being reverse engineered in a secret hangar, but there are ghosts. They are not the kind that rattle chains or whisper in the dark. They are the kind that get inside your body, settling in your lungs and your bones. The kind you breathe in. The real purpose of that base wasn't about hiding a new stealth jet or a crashed UFO. It was about psychology. It was a massive, decades-long experiment to see how much a person could see, feel, and suffer before the system could convince them it never happened. I didn't break, but I was bent so badly, twisted into such a different shape. I don't think I'll ever be right again. My journey into that empty, forbidden place started like any other temporary duty assignment. I was handed a set of sealed orders at Nellis Air Force Base and put on a flight out of Las Vegas. We didn't depart from the main McCarran Airport, but from a private, completely unmarked terminal on the far side of the airfield. This was the legendary Janet flight, the unofficial, secret airline for employees and contractors heading into the void. The plane itself was an ordinary Boeing 737, but stripped of any identifying logos or colors, a ghost in the civilian world. The passengers were a strange, silent mix of people dedicated to secret projects. There were quiet, thoughtful engineers in casual polo shirts, veteran test pilots with a 1,000-yard stare who seemed to be looking at a different horizon. And then there was us, the security forces, a handful of young men looking nervous and out of place in our crisp desert uniforms. The flight was short, maybe 30 minutes, and completely silent. It was an unspoken rule. No one talked. No one made eye contact. The windows weren't blacked out, but no one dared to look outside, as if acknowledging the forbidden landscape below would be a breach of protocol. We were flying to a place that was a blank spot on any public map, and it felt like they wanted us to remain in the dark until our boots were standing on the ground. When the plane door finally hissed open, a blast of punishing heat and brilliant light hit us like a physical blow. The air there felt different, ancient, and alien. It was thin, incredibly dry, and carried a weird, metallic taste on the back of your tongue, like licking a battery. The base was not what I expected. There were no futuristic silver buildings or secret tunnels visible on the surface. It was a sprawling, dusty collection of utilitarian hangars, low-slow offices, and prefabricated buildings, all shimmering under the relentless desert sun. The official name on our welcome brief was Watertown, a sterile designation left over from the 1950s when the CI first built the facility for the U-2 spy plane project. To make the desolate place sound more appealing to the first generation of engineers and pilots who had to live there, they also called it Paradise Ranch. That name was a sick, twisted joke. This place was hell with a runway attached. My first week was a slow descent into a bureaucratic nightmare. I signed so many non-disclosure agreements and security oaths that they could have legally promised me life in a federal prison if I ever even mumbled about my job in my sleep. Then came the endless briefings. They hammered the same point home over and over again with an almost religious fervor. Everything is compartmentalized. You have your job, you have your assigned area, and you have your security clearance. A stern-faced major told our group, his face a perfect, emotionless mask. You do not ask about the job of the person standing next to you. You do not discuss what you see on your shift. You do not speculate about what goes on behind a door you are not authorized to open. You are one small component in a very large, very complex machine. You only need to know your own function. My function was on the far eastern edge of the sprawling base. I was assigned to a small 4-man team, tasked with guarding 4 massive hangars we were told were no longer in active use. Hangars 17, 18, 19, and 20. They were enormous, windowless concrete boxes, just sitting and baking in the oppressive heat. The old-timers, the civilian contractors who had been at the base for decades, had stories about them. They talked about clandestine Cold War projects, a time when the Air Force got its hands on captured Soviet MiG fighter jets. They claimed those very jets were brought right here, to these hangars, and meticulously taken apart piece by piece to learn their secrets. We were told, with a knowing smirk, that we were guarding the ghosts of old enemy planes. The job itself seemed mind-numbingly simple. We sat in a small guard shack with a struggling air conditioning unit, watched a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, and walked the perimeter every 2 hours. We were just a visible deterrent, a show of force. The real security was the miles of empty desert, the hidden motion sensors, the silent drones that circled high overhead, and the base's own Praetorian Guard, the security contractors we called the camos. They drove around in unmarked white pickup trucks, their faces hidden behind sunglasses, watching everyone. That included us. For the first few days, the boredom was so profound it made my mind feel numb and smooth. The sun would rise, painting the distant mountains in incredible shades of orange and purple. The heat would build to an impossible intensity. The crushing silence was only broken by the rattle of the AC unit and the distant, high-pitched scream of a jet we were trained to pretend we couldn't hear. We worked grueling 12-hour shifts. The routine is designed to make you lose track of time, to blur the days and nights together into one long, monotonous stretch. And in that enforced quiet, your mind starts to fixate on the little things. That strange metallic taste in the air, it seemed to get stronger, more pronounced after certain experimental planes took off. And the ground, every once in a while, it would hum. A low, deep vibration that resonated up through the soles of your boots. It wasn't an earthquake. It felt manufactured. It felt like someone had struck a giant tuning fork, buried miles beneath the earth. The first truly strange event happened during my second week, a little after 3 in the morning. The desert was so dark, it felt like a physical weight, a black velvet cloak that swallowed all light. I was walking the fence line near Hangar 18 when the humming started. It was stronger this time, more insistent. I could feel it vibrating through the concrete and up my legs. It was a steady, low thrum that went on for a whole minute, making my teeth ache. My radio crackled to life, startlingly loud in the silence. All stations, shelter in place. I repeat, all stations, shelter in place. Please confirm. They gave no reason, no explanation. Just the stark, urgent order. I confirmed and sprinted back to the relative safety of the guard shack. My heart was pounding in my chest. My partner for the night, a young airman named Garcia, looked pale and confused. What in the world was that? He asked, his voice trembling slightly. Command just ordered us to shelter in place, I said, as I threw the deadbolt on the heavy steel door. The official rulebook stated this order was for an imminent weather event, like a sudden, violent dust storm. But the sky outside was perfectly clear and littered with a billion stars. There was no wind. There was only the hum. Through the thick, reinforced window, we saw headlights approaching at high speed from the direction of the main base complex. It wasn't one of the camo trucks. This was a larger, specialized vehicle, like an armored ambulance. It screeched to a halt about 100 yards away, near a series of tall poles with sensor boxes on them that I had assumed were for weather monitoring. 2 figures in full, gleaming white hazmat suits climbed out. They moved with a frantic, controlled energy, sweeping the ground near the poles with a handheld device that whined and clicked. Even from a distance, you could see they were moving with a kind of contained panic. 10 minutes later, they hastily packed up their equipment and drove away, disappearing back into the darkness. An hour later, the all-clear signal came over the radio. Just like that, the event was over. We were explicitly instructed not to make a report or log the incident. When our shift supervisor, Master Sergeant Riggs, came to relieve us in the morning, I tried to ask him what had happened. He looked right past me, his gaze fixed on the empty desert. They were tracking high-altitude wind shear, some unusual atmospheric stuff. It passed. Nothing to be worried about, Sergeant. But the ground was shaking. Garcia started to say, his voice full of doubt. Riggs cut him off instantly. His voice dropped, becoming as cold and hard as stone. What hum? You two need more sleep. The desert plays tricks on you. Don't write it down. Don't talk about it. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. But it felt like a fundamental rule had been broken. The perfect, seamless secrecy of the base now had a visible crack in it, and I had the terrifying feeling that something bad was leaking out. The very next day, Garcia reported to the medical clinic. He had a splitting headache and complained that the coppery taste in his mouth wouldn't go away, no matter how much water he drank. They gave him some painkillers and sent him away with an official diagnosis of heat stress and dehydration. That soon became the go-to explanation for everything. Feeling nauseous? Heat stress? Dizzy spells? Dehydration? That persistent, dry cough that started to spread like wildfire through the living quarters? Just the dry desert air. But more and more men got sick. One guard on the day shift, a guy named Jensen, started acting erratically. He became obsessed with cleaning the dust off his gear, constantly and compulsively wiping everything down. He told me in a hushed, nervous tone that he saw a shimmer in the air one afternoon near the hangars, like heat rising from asphalt. A week later, he was gone. The official story was a family emergency back home that required his immediate transfer. Nobody believed it for a second. We were all issued standard-issue dosimeter badges to measure radiation exposure, but they were collected each week, and we were never, ever told the results. One of the older civilian workers, a maintenance man named Dale, just let out a dry, humorless laugh when I asked him about it. "Son," he said, pulling me aside in the crowded dining hall, "those badges are just for show. They're a liability shield. They don't want to know the real numbers. And trust me, you don't want to know either." Dale had worked at the facility, off and on, since the late 1970s. He told me that our base was built right on the edge of the old Nevada test site. Between 1951 and 1962, the U.S. government had detonated over 100 nuclear bombs in the open atmosphere, just over the mountains from where we were standing. He said that after one particularly dirty test, an unexpected wind shift sent a massive radioactive cloud drifting right over the base. They just kept working? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, completely shocked. Dale nodded slowly, his eyes dark with memory. National security, son. The work was too important to stop. They hosed down the buildings and told everyone it was just dust from the desert. But that dust, that poison, it never really goes away. It gets into the soil. It gets into the groundwater. It becomes a permanent part of the place. And every now and then, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Something shakes it loose. That very night, another tremor hit. It was stronger, more violent. I was inside the shack. The corrugated metal walls buzzed and vibrated. The overhead lights flickered erratically. A fine gray dust, dislodged by the shaking, began to sift down from the ceiling tiles. My radio squawked, "Shelter in place." But this time, I felt it inside me. A wave of profound sickness washed over me. The metallic taste was so strong, it was like my mouth was filled with a handful of old, dirty coins. My skin began to itch and burn. I looked over at my partner for the night. A thin trickle of bright red blood was running from his nose. We were being poisoned, and they were telling us it was just the weather. The pressure was a constant, crushing weight. It wasn't just the physical effects of the tremors and the spreading sickness. It was the insidious psychological pressure of the system itself. A system designed to make you believe you were going crazy. Every symptom was neatly explained away. Every cautious question was met with a veiled threat. The entire environment was engineered to make you doubt the evidence of your own senses. I felt like I was trapped in a cage. My entire world had shrunk to the size of my small room, the mess hall, and that lonely stretch of fence. Sleep offered no escape. When I did manage to drift off, I had recurring nightmares filled with a low, gut-wrenching humming sound and the image of a fine gray dust raining down on me. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. My hands began to shake with a tremor I couldn't control. I started my own quiet, desperate investigation. I noticed there were water coolers everywhere, plastered with signs reminding us to stay hydrated. A simple, effective way to try and flush certain toxins out of the body. I began to notice an unnatural number of dead animals, lizards, birds, even desert snakes, lying along the fence line near the hangars. There were far too many of them to be a natural occurrence. The moment everything finally and irrevocably fell apart came during my last week. I was put on a solo night shift watching Hangar 18. The official reason was that they were short on personnel. In my heart, I think they knew I was asking too many questions, and they wanted to isolate me. Around 2 in the morning, the biggest tremor yet started. It wasn't a hum. It was a deep, grinding roar that felt like it was coming from directly underneath my feet. The concrete floor of the guard shack shook so violently that a computer monitor slid off the desk and shattered on the ground. The main lights went out, plunging me into darkness. A moment later, the emergency strobes kicked on, bathing everything in a pulsing, sickly red light. My nose started bleeding, a hot, thick flow that soaked the front of my shirt. I was so dizzy, I had to grip the edge of the desk just to keep from falling over. The air grew thick and heavy, and the metallic taste was so overpowering, it made me want to throw up. And there, in the flashing red light, I saw it. A thick, shimmering cloud, like the heat haze you see rising from a hot road, was pouring out of a large ventilation grate on the side of Hangar 18. It wasn't smoke. It was like the air itself was twisting and contorting, a ghostly, invisible substance rising silently into the night sky. I should have followed my orders. I knew the shelter-in-place command was about to come screaming over the radio, but a reckless, desperate need to finally know what was happening to us overwhelmed my training. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and stumbled out of the shack and into the vibrating night. The closer I got to the hangar, the heavier the air felt, like it was charged with static electricity. The hair on my arms and the back of my neck stood on end. The plume of poison poured silently from the vent. It wasn't a secret weapon being tested. It wasn't the exhaust from an alien ship. It was pure, refined poison. Suddenly, with a loud hiss of pneumatics, a reinforced door on the side of the hangar slid open. A figure emerged, completely encased in a fully enclosed, heavy-duty hazmat suit. The kind they use for the most dangerous radioactive and biological threats. The figure was holding some kind of sophisticated sensor. When he saw me standing there, frozen in the red, pulsing light, he stopped dead. His panicked voice, distorted and loud, blared from his suit's external speaker. Containment breach at 18. We have an unauthorized exposure. A guard is outside the perimeter. He took a clumsy step toward me and raised a hand, a universal gesture of pure, unadulterated panic. I shined my flashlight beam on his face mask and saw the raw terror in his eyes. He didn't have to scream a warning at me. His fear was the warning. The horrifying truth crashed down on me all at once. The tremors weren't earthquakes. They were caused by some massive secret activity happening deep underground at the base. And every time the ground shook, it was intentionally kicking up Dale's hot dust, the lingering radioactive fallout from the old atmospheric atomic bomb tests. They weren't just letting it leak. They were agitating it, aerosolizing it, turning it into a fine, breathable mist. And then they were deliberately venting it into the air. We weren't guards. We were human sensors. We were living, breathing canaries in a coal mine. We were the unwitting test subjects in a secret, long-term experiment to see what decades of low-level radioactive contamination does to the human body. The base wasn't built to keep aliens in. It was built to keep this terrible, lingering poison contained. And we, the disposable security guards, were the cost of that containment. We could be thrown away. I stumbled backward as my legs gave out from under me. The world was spinning. The flashing red lights, the terrifying figure in the hazmat suit, the shimmering cloud of invisible death. The last thing I remember before I passed out was the overwhelming taste of metal and dust. I woke up in the stark, sterile environment of the base clinic. Everything was painfully bright and white. A young medic was checking the monitors beside my bed. My nose was packed with cotton, and 4-line was taped to the back of my arm, feeding clear fluid into my veins. What happened? I asked, my voice hoarse and weak. "You passed out, Sergeant," he said, without looking me in the eye. His voice was light and unnervingly rehearsed. A classic case of severe dehydration and heat exhaustion. You security guys really need to drink more water out there. Dehydration, the lie they used to cover everything. The lie that was killing us. I saw at Hangar 18. There was a leak, I croaked, trying to sit up. A man in a suit. The medic's eyes were completely blank, devoid of any empathy or recognition. "You must have been dreaming, Sergeant. The heat can cause vivid hallucinations. You probably hit your head when you fell. Hangar 18 isn't active. It's just a big, dusty garage." He was lying. I knew he was lying, but his face was a perfect mask of professional concern. Deny, dismiss, discredit. That was the official protocol. Master Sergeant Riggs came in later that afternoon. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He just handed me a new set of orders. My temporary duty assignment at the base was being cut short. "You're being medevaced to a larger facility for a full medical evaluation," he said, his tone flat. "For your ... condition." He said the word condition as if it were something shameful, a personal failing. "Your dosimeter badge was unfortunately damaged when you fell. Shattered the casing. So we don't have a final reading for you this week. Sorry about that." My badge, damaged. Of course it was. My personal notebook, where I had started meticulously writing down the dates of the tremors and a list of my symptoms, was gone from my belongings. Confiscated for a routine security review, Riggs explained without a hint of irony. My travel paperwork had been completely replaced. The new documents didn't mention Groom Lake or Watertown. They listed a nondescript alphanumeric code, a string of numbers and letters that meant nothing. They were methodically erasing my paper trail before I had even left the hospital bed. The final step of my departure was a chillingly quiet meeting with a man in a plain gray suit who showed up in my room. He didn't give me his name. He didn't need to. He radiated an aura of absolute authority. "You've had a very special and sensitive assignment, Sergeant," he said, his voice calm and dispassionate. "You signed many non-disclosure agreements. We expect you to honor them to the letter. That means you will not discuss. Let's call them unusual environmental phenomena, or any unsubstantiated health problems that cannot be definitively proven. To speculate about these things would constitute a grave threat to the security of the United States. Do you understand? It wasn't a real question. It was a threat, elegantly disguised as a legal reminder. He was telling me, in no uncertain terms, that my own body was now a classified government location. The silent Janet flight back to Las Vegas was the loneliest journey of my life. I had been to the black heart of America's secret world, and it had branded me with an invisible, toxic scar. I left Area 51 with an official diagnosis of dehydration and a headache that would never completely go away. That was 15 years ago. I received a medical discharge from the Air Force a year later for a collection of vague, unrelated ailments. It wasn't for radiation poisoning or toxic exposure, of course. My official service records were a redacted, confusing mess. My time at Groom Lake was data masked, a bureaucratic term which means it was buried so deep under layers of classification that, for all intents and purposes, it never happened. To the Department of Veterans Affairs, it looked like I spent a quiet month at some nameless supply warehouse in the Nevada desert. My health problems started small and grew insidiously. I was tired all the time, a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. My joints ached constantly. Then the tumors started to appear. They were benign. My civilian doctors kept telling me, not cancerous. But I had dozens of them, small lumps under the skin all over my body. My doctors were baffled. They had no idea why a healthy young man would suddenly develop such a condition. I tried to get help from the VA. I filed claims. I wrote letters. The answer was always the same, a bureaucratic brick wall. Insufficient evidence to link your condition to your time in service. No proof you were exposed to any hazardous materials. How can you prove you were poisoned at a place the government didn't even officially admit existed until 2013? For years, I thought I was alone, that I was just unlucky. Then, through the internet, I found others, hundreds of them, a scattered, broken community of veterans and former contractors who served at Groom Lake and other secret bases all over the Nevada test and training range. Their stories were eerily, terrifyingly similar to mine. The strange, unexplainable sicknesses, the rare cancers, the children born with debilitating birth defects, and the same impenetrable wall of denial from the government they had served. We are a community of ghosts, connected by a toxic secret we all share in our blood and our bones. We call ourselves the victims of the invisible enemy. It's an enemy that doesn't carry a gun. It's an enemy that follows you home from the desert, an enemy that poisons you slowly from the inside out. The government has compensation programs to pay the civilian workers who got sick at these secret places, but they have fought tooth and nail for decades against helping the uniformed soldiers who were ordered to serve there. The real horrifying secret of Area 51 isn't about aliens or spaceships. It's about sacrifice. Not the heroic, noble kind you see in war movies. It's the cold, calculated, bureaucratic sacrifice of your own people in the name of national security. They put our lives on a scale against their secrets, and we were deemed the acceptable loss. The true horror of that place isn't a crashed saucer in a hangar. It's the simple, soul-crushing knowledge that we were knowingly sent into a poisoned wasteland, told it was paradise, and then systematically abandoned to get sick and die while our own government pretends we were never even there. My name is Cole Matthews. I saw the horrifying truth, and it's still killing us. If you like this video, then you will surely like more creepypastas like this. So I ask you to subscribe to my channel and like this video and share your opinion or suggestion in the comment. That was it for this video. Mr. Creepmare is signing out. Sleep without nightmares.